This one, people seem to be getting around it quick. So, all right, here we go. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Hector Aguilar with Aguilar Realty Group. Once again, thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Today, I'm accompanied by Paulina of MT Evictions. Hi, Paulina.
Hello, Hector. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for making the time to talk about a topic that I think is really sensitive in today's real estate market, with regards to tenant rights and landlord rights, and just all the government things that are going on, rent control, and a ton of information. So thanks for setting some time aside, and we're definitely looking forward to having you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Paulina.
Thank you. Yes, I've been doing evictions, believe it or not, for 17 years now. But this is the first time it's evolved so much in such a short period of time. So just with everyone else, we're going through the growing challenges of learning all the new stuff. But I am what you call UDA paralegal. That means I'm licensed by the state to do what I do. This is my very own company. I opened it 8 years ago, but I do have a great support and umbrella of attorneys by our side.
Oh, fantastic. That's wonderful. It's good to know that that you have been prepared enough to be able to, represent both landlords and tenants at a high level, especially if you have a group of attorneys. So that's awesome. So today, Paulina, I'd like you to maybe take us and walk us through, the topic of landlord rights and tenant rights, and then, some updates. So why don't you go ahead and take it away? I'll go ahead and add your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, most definitely. And we are the landlord's ally. So we mainly service property owners, landlords, investors, property managers, and the complexities of the landlord-tenant law. Now, our mission is to guide, educate our community of clients in a cost-efficient manner. So, meaning, although we're an eviction company, we try to avoid an eviction, because especially right now during this climate. So we try to mitigate the situation with buyout agreements, doing what we normally do in court, but outside the court system, because it's just everyone's happier if we save money and time, right?
Sure.
Now, we are experienced in layered rent control. In a minute, you're going to see what that means. Also, REAP, Section 8, and anything to do really with the LA County. LA County is our problem child there.
Yeah.
So we love to keep our clients updated.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you only focus on LA County, or do you service like San Bernardino, Orange, and Riverside County as well?
Yeah, we mainly work with 4 counties, the ones you just mentioned, actually.
Okay.
LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. This is going to be our agenda today. I will explain in brief what layered rent control is.
Okay.
What's going on right now with the rent phases. What type of evictions are allowed.
Okay.
The latest news. I'm going to touch on rent increases, how to get your files ready if you're looking into evicting, and our fee schedule, and of course, any questions that hopefully come our way, or if you have any, this is the time.
Right. And we'll probably hold the question and answers to the very end. Obviously, you have a jam-packed agenda to cover, and again, landlord updates and tenant rights is a hot topic in today's real estate market. So, we're looking forward to it. So take it away.
Thank you so much. So this gives you a little bit of the idea of how the complexity with the different rules and regulations.
Wow.
But like I tell realtors, don't worry, you focus on making money, selling real estate. When you have an issue with the tenant, you could rely on our team, because it's impossible for all of us to master all careers, our crafts, right? We should be master our own craft. So definitely you could rely on your eviction specialist to give you what I call property research. A property research will let you identify the type of rent control law that your particular property is subject to. And as you could see, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Mm-hmm. A lot of different questions come into play. The main question I like to ask is, what what's the address to the property? What is the city? What city is the property located in, right? For example, if I realize that the property is located in the county of Orange, Riverside, or San Bernardino, I know really we don't have to worry about anything besides state law rules. Why? Because state law, I apologize for that, governs those counties, because those counties do not believe in rent control and do not have their own set of rules.
Gotcha. Understood.
Okay. Now we have
on your slide. It's interesting. You have 3 cities that are synonymous with rent control, which is Los Angeles, of course, Santa Monica, which has a tough rent control law, and Pasadena. So, it's important to let sellers know, people that have property in those areas, to know that you're working with someone that's well experienced in dealing in those 3 cities and other cities and the counties that are that they have their properties in. And that's what this presentation is for, is to let sellers know that, hey, if you have a tenant problem, come to us, come to Paulina, we'll help you out and she'll take care of the rest. That's all you want, is to have someone like Paulina and her experienced team to handle any of those, tenant issues and rent control issues that you might have, or concerns you might have on your property. So go ahead, Paulina.
Yeah, most definitely. You could trust on our team. I spent hours, nights, I don't sleep, whenever I know there's a new update, and getting polished and up to date for our clients, because we know how important and crucial it is to be up to date. So we definitely have everyone in our staff up to date with the information. Now, and to your point, LA County example, LA County has 88 cities. Out of those 88 cities, 26 have their own restrictions.
Okay.
So this is where, when someone asks, well, could I evict? My question is always going to be, it depends, right?
Right.
Because it comes down to type of governing law that you're subject to. And the type of governing law that you're subject to could vary because the property was built in a certain year. Example, let's say you have a duplex that sits inside LA City. If that property was built before 1978, it's going to be subject to LA City rent control rules.
Okay.
Now, let's say your neighbor has also a duplex, but his property happened to be built in 1995. Now, he's going to be subject to state rules, because LA City doesn't govern properties built after this date, October 1st, 1978. But now it taps into state law, because this came into play in January 1st, 2020.
Wow, I wasn't aware of that. I learned
Yeah,
something
but
new.
now let's say that your other neighbor also has a duplex, but his duplex was built in the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
That one's going to be out of rent control, no rules.
Fantastic.
So the year the property is built comes into play. Also, if, for example, you were dealing with single family homes, title comes into play. Is it held by an individual, a trust, or an LLC?
Okay.
That changes if you're going to be exempt from rent control or in rent control.
Okay. It's good to know.
And on that note, this is funny, because sometimes we get a landlord that had a single family home. Single family home was built, original build 1958. Then they did an ADU, right? Then the ADU has a certificate of occupancy of 2013. So guess what? Now we have 2 properties with 2 different rules on the same land. The front one was built before 1978, so it's LA City. The other one is new built, so it's no rent control.
Wow. That's a very, very interesting topic, because many owners right now, as you know, there's Senate bills that are out right now allowing homeowners that have the space and that meet city requirements to build ADUs. So that's really good to know, because a lot of people might be afraid of maybe building ADUs, thinking that they might fall into rent control, and it's maybe a headache they don't want to take on. So what a wonderful tip.
Yeah, it's free land, free money.
Right?
Just get a loan, right? You already have the land. The Senate bill that you're talking about is Senate Bill 9 and Senate Bill 10, where the government, because of the housing shortage, is allowing, even if you have a single family home, regardless of the zoning, to build up to 3 additional units and making it a total of 4.
Wow. That's fantastic. And that's due to the fact that they're trying to help the housing need, right? We all know that there's a housing shortage, especially in LA City and some of the more populated cities. So these Senate bills are in place to allow homeowners who have land, regardless of zoning, to build an additional 3 units to either, have allowable income for your families, or just to, maybe accommodate additional family members like older children with young families, things of that nature. Because we know that right now, there's a lot of young families that are living with their parents because rents are high, or there's just nowhere near that they can buy that's close to their job. So what a great Senate bill that was passed.
Yeah, definitely. Now, that segues me into the following. Because there's so much complexity and the type of rules, as of January 1st, 2020, it is the landlord's responsibility to notify the renter what type of rules they fall under.
Gotcha.
That is what we call in a governing law disclosure addendum.
Understood.
So if anyone that's out there that does not know what that is, or you're not sure if you have it or not, you could always email our team. And we charge $75 for the addendum, English and Spanish. If you only need one language, then it's $50.
Okay. That's very economical, very reasonable.
And so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And this is just to give you an idea of the type of questions we ask to identify the type of rent control. If a property would be exempt, if it was built in the last 15 years, or if it's a single family home owned by an LLC, except in unincorporated LA. Unincorporated LA does govern single family homes for no fault evictions only. Mm-hmm. As far as rent increases, they cannot govern that, but they do govern the allowance of a landlord to evict a tenant. Then we have the
Can I ask a quick question? The unincorporated areas of LA County, just to give an example, right here locally, there's Valinda, right? Valinda is known as a city, but it's really not incorporated. It's not part of let's say, the city of La Puente or the city of West Covina. It's kind of a section between those two cities that falls, and people call it Valinda. It doesn't have a city hall, but it's in part of an unincorporated area of LA County. So that would be a good example. There's other, cities or areas that, for example, I believe, I know for sure Valinda is one of them, but there's several of them that, for example, like Signal Hill or some cities that.
Good point.
Right?
Because funny enough, I'm just discovering that there's so many cities that I thought they were their own city, but they're not. Example. And every city has a part that's its city and a part that's not. Pasadena. It has unincorporated and incorporated. El Monte, Paramount, Huntington Park, Long Beach, which is Signal Hill. You just mentioned that. Hacienda Heights, Arcadia, San Gabriel, Rosemead. We're like, whoa, this is a lot more than we initially thought. It was only East LA and the Walnut area.
Right.
We're now realizing that there's so many other cities that are not part of an actual city.
Absolutely. And to your point, it's important for the landlord or the owners to at least investigate, because they may not know that they're in part of unincorporated LA County area and may have to be subject to different rules. So it's great to mention it and to understand that it's important for you to at least discover. And that's why I guess getting the address where the property is located and got all these questions answered is important to allow Paulina and her team to do what they do best.
Definitely. And to your point, we actually had a scenario where a client purchased a property that was targeted as LA City rent control. They couldn't get rid of the tenant. And this is pre-pandemic, right before, for like a discounted rate because they didn't want to deal with the eviction. They came to us and we're like, oh my God, the seller didn't realize he was sitting in a pot of gold. Property was actually exempt from rent control because of the year that was built. So the tenant needed zero relocation, and we could have, if the seller would have done the research, would have cleared the unit, the property would have been sold for even over market rental value, asking price, because any property in a rent controlled area that's not subject to rent control is, worth a lot more. People, investors look for them.
Right. I was going to say that, it's more attractive to investors because they don't have to worry about rent control, and they can increase their rent and not have to be subject to governing laws that otherwise would be a headache for some of these investors.
So the buyer lucked out because he even got relocation credit in the sale that he didn't even have to use because the tenant didn't tap into it.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, the buyer got a good deal in that situation.
Definitely. So don't get caught in that situation. We do property research for $50 for those that just, all you want to know is exactly what you're dealing with. We ask the questions, we do the research, you get back a consulting report with the information that you need to know.
Awesome.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to move into rents owed. So this information, luckily, is statewide. We don't have to worry about the area that you're in. Now, this, you could see we have three different phases. And really, it comes because we had changes in the law. So phase one was back at the beginning of COVID, March 2020. It was presumed that we were going to be out of the emergency order by August 2020, right? So during that time, we had a set of rules. Then it got extended for a whole year, September 2020 through September 2021. That's phase two. And then finally, we have phase three that expires next month. So far, we have not getting word of this getting extended again. So we are not expecting a phase four. And we're, especially after seeing Mr. Newsom at the game this Sunday and him getting the heat for still being under state of emergency, we're really hoping that after April 1st, we're out of the state of emergency with no longer the extensions of the COVID phase rules.
So what does that mean to landlords exactly in terms of these extensions not being, or these particular laws not being extended, let's say April 1st? Does that mean that landlords will have the opportunity to pursue full force evictions?
It means that we go back to traditional law. What is traditional law? Your tenant doesn't pay you the rent, you give a 3-day notice. The tenant doesn't pay within the 3 days, you commence your eviction procedure. That's what that would mean. If otherwise, we have to follow the current procedures in place. The procedure that needs to be followed, it depends on the months that the rents are due. So example, you have a tenant that still owes money from 2 years ago, from the beginning of the pandemic. If you are outside LA City, you could actually already go after that money in small claims court. Okay. Phase two, if your renter at least paid 25% of the rent for that year, you could not go after them in an eviction, but you could go after them in small claims. Number three, phase three, that's from October to March. The tenant was supposed to now pay 100% of the rent unless they're participating on the rent relief program. This is the housing is key. California vowed to pay back landlords which they have not received rents. Now, it is the landlord obligation to commence the application process.
Is that something that you guys provide assistance with at MT Evictions, or you guys deal mainly with just evictions?
Good question. We don't, because they could get free help from the 1-800 number, and it's really easy. A landlord, all they have to do is open the application, submit the it's like data entry mainly, and it takes
very
15
simple.
minutes. Very simple.
Excellent. And then a question for you is, are landlords able to apply for those funds dated back to March 2020, or is it like in sections only?
Good question. I love your questions. The rent is going to be covered past due starting April 2020. through
Fantastic. So a landlord can
March
recover.
22.
Yeah, a landlord can recover plenty of months owed since April of 2020 to March of 2022. I mean, that's almost a complete 2 years of back due, rents that they haven't received. So that's great for landlords because landlords, let's be honest, landlords, even though that they have their properties, they've rented them out, they're struggling too. Not only they're carrying, who knows how many properties they have. It could be a single, a single landlord, a single property landlord, or they can have 3 or 4 properties. And if all the renters aren't paying them, that they're carrying a big load. So it's good to know that they have an opportunity to recover at least 24 months of back due rent.
Definitely. Now, at the beginning of the program, rent relief was paying the landlords back fairly fast. It was taking about 6 weeks for a landlord to get paid. Right now, because of course there's a higher volume of applications that are taking about 4 to 5 months to get paid out. But
Gotcha.
so as long as you're in the system, you will receive that money. Now, due to that, a landlord cannot start an eviction procedure unless they have a rejection letter that the tenant got rejected because they didn't submit their end of the application, or they were inactive. Inactive means they didn't participate at all. So if the tenant is ignoring this help, then that is a reason to evict.
Understood. So let me ask you a question, and this might be a little sensitive one with regards to recovering rents. There's a lot of homeowners out there that they live in their home, they're elderly, they're already retired, they're small families, and this happens a lot. I've seen this in LA city limits, where they have older properties that have multiple rooms, and they've brought in, room tenants. How does the law apply to them who haven't received rent from these room tenants and can't get them out of their house? Are they able to also apply for this kind of relief?
Luckily, whether you have an illegal rental unit or a roommate, the rent relief it's for everyone.
That's great.
And actually, as of last month, there is mortgage relief for landlords that own or live in their home, and they had a hardship, and their banks are not giving them forbearance. They could now apply for mortgage relief as well.
Fantastic. That's great information. Hopefully we can get these links to show them before the end of the presentation. That way we can, display that information to either landlords that need tenant relief or mortgage relief.
Definitely. Yeah. For those that need to know the information now, if you just Google housing is key, you will find the information directly.
Fantastic. Housing is key. Thank you very much for that, Paulina. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what's allowed, right? So outside LA County, we're back to business. We've been back to business since October 1st, 2021. Landlord occupancy evictions, non-payment of rent, substantial rehab, breach of lease, public health and safety, or illegal activity. The only area that is giving us restrictions is, once again, LA County. So I'm going to go straight into LA County. Now, this was just released, I don't even know what day I live in. Today's Tuesday. This was released last Tuesday. So
today's the 2nd, so it was released January, I think it's 27th or 26th, something like that.
Yes. So this was released by the county, the Board of Supervisors from LA County, and it's going to be effective starting April 1st through the end of the year. And the reason they're doing this April 1st through the end of the year, I'm going to back up to the rent relief. If you notice, phase 3 ends on March 2022. And there's rumors that it will not continue to extend. As such, LA County said, well, we're not ready for that. We're going to continue to issue eviction protection to tenants through the end of 2022 with the possibility of extending through 2023.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is a little tough.
Yeah, that's a little tough for landlords. I mean, especially if they've got tenants in their properties that haven't paid and now are under the extended eviction protection through 2022 and possibly 2023. I mean, this could be a very challenging situation for many investors that maybe not be able to carry those mortgages on those properties for the next 2 years. So very good to know.
So the only good news with the extension is that commercial protections are expired. What does that mean? That means that prior to this, if you had a commercial renter that was not paying rents, you couldn't give it a 3-day or a 30-day, even if they were on a month-to-month. So starting as of yesterday, February 1st, 2021, the 3-day notices are back.
Okay.
But if you notice, it's as of February 1st, 2021. So if you have a commercial renter that still owes back rent, that's still frozen. We can't go for those rents. But starting from February 1st and on, so if today is February 2nd and the tenant has not paid this month's rent, you could start preparing your traditional 3-day notice.
Gotcha. And this is for commercial tenants, restaurants, office space, strip centers, things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
All right. Anything else that might fall under commercial protections that we may not be aware of?
Commercial in our line of field is anything that's used for a business.
So warehouses would fall under
license. So warehouse. Now, we've had situations where it is commercial zoning, it is a commercial area, and there's tenants living there. So that taps any time that you have people staying there overnight, it is considered residential, so it taps into residential law and protections. So we've had churches where they allow people to live inside the center overnight. They tap into residential protections.
Gotcha. So there are churches that have, their halls, their activity halls, and sometimes, they'll house a lot of times homeless people or maybe just some of their church members that are in need. And so that'll change the actual law that applies into a residential protection.
Correct.
Gotcha. Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Also mixed use. There are lots are being rented as commercial and residential. So wherever someone sleeps, even if it's their place of business, once again, it translates into residential.
Understood. All right. Good to know.
Now, another big one that we're excited for is after number 7 here, after June 1st, so we still have a couple more months to go, but a tenant could no longer refuse the landlord entry to the rental unit. So prior to this change that's going to take effect June 1st, a tenant in the name of COVID could refuse entry to an appraisal, to a home inspector, to prospect buyers. That stops now.
Fantastic. June 1st. That's good news. That'll hopefully, there's so many, and this is going to help sellers that are currently on the market that have had tenant issues and haven't been able to close because the new buyers don't want to take the risk of this tenant not paying. And a lot of times buyers, I'm in an escrow right now, and we've been in escrow going on 4 to 5 months on this particular transaction, where since July of last year, where my buyer's ready to go, appraisal's done, they're fully pre-approved, but the tenant has been using the eviction protections laws to his advantage, and he hasn't left the property, so we can't close on the deal. So at least at the very best, it's going to allow us, entry to the appraisal and to the inspection, things of that nature, so that we can maybe move forward with that transaction. So good to know.
Yeah, definitely. And besides that, number 4, the eviction for landlord occupancy, that as of right now, it's only for current owners, not new owners.
Okay.
Starting June 1st.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, so let's say, Hector, you purchased this property in December, and you purchased it to move in there. But because of the eviction moratorium, you cannot request the property for you to move in, landlord move in. So as of right now, you're frozen. Now, let's say we have the same scenario with your neighbor. Your neighbor has a home that he needs to move into, but he was the owner of the property prior to February 1st, 2020.
Okay.
I'm sorry, June 1st, 2021. So the law changed in June. So those, if you closed after June, you don't have the right to request the property for yourself, even if you're the landlord. Only previous owners that were owners prior to June 2021. Now, this is going to change starting June 1st, 2022. So any new buyer or existing owner, doesn't matter if you're new or old, you get to request the property for personal move-in or family move-in.
So for example, let's just say you're a landlord that has, one or two properties, and you've sold a couple of your properties, and you have one more property, and your intention is to recuperate that property to become owner occupant. As of June 1st, 2022, you're going to be able to deliver a notice to vacate to your tenant and ask them to move out because you're going to occupy the property as your principal residence. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, disclosure, there's no longer just one simple notice. Nowadays, an average 60-day notice comes with 3 other notices. So any notice now has to have a handful of warnings. So it is very important that you don't do your own notices. Consult with the professional. Make sure you don't. The last thing you want to do is 60 days are here. You're ready to proceed with your legal eviction, and then you realize that you missed a notice. And then the time frame restarts because you have to
all over again.
Correct.
What a great point. A lot of times, landlords and property owners, they'll come to me as a real estate agent and they'll say, hey, can you deliver this notice for me? And honestly, I'm not, number one, I'm not allowed to do that. I don't have the experience to do that, but I'm not a licensed person to do that. So in this particular situation, you're better off, instead of delivering the note yourself, hey, it might be in your best interest to invest maybe $50, $75, $100, whatever it is, to consult with Paulina and her team in order to make sure that your notices are effective, that they're delivered at the right time, and that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, so that when you're in that situation, you don't have to experience having to start all over again after you're in it 60 days, and you find out that something wasn't done right or a notice wasn't filed right, so then you have to start all over. So what a great point, Paulina.
100%. I always tell clients, do not do your own divorce, do not do your own taxes, and do not do your own evictions. You will regret it.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
I repeat, this information is only inside LA County. If you're outside LA County, it's so much easier. Everything is back on. Game is on.
Right.
Okay. This is a certain types of notices that mainly we work with or that we have to deal with. We have the 3-day, the 10-day, the 5-day, the 30, 60, 90, 15-day. And all evictions will be the same regardless of the situation, but the situation is the foundation to your notice. And the notice is the foundation to your eviction. So the type of notice matters.
So it's absolutely important for you to have a conversation with those landlords, determine what kind of notices they're going to need, correct?
Correct. In some scenarios, we need 2 to 3 notices to protect certain covenants that they're missing on their rental agreement or the addendum declarations, so on and so forth.
Speaking of rental agreements, I know that, I don't know if it's your scope of services, but do you charge a service for fee if you have a landlord that wants to maybe put together an agreement with the tenant? Is that something that you provide, or do you refer?
Yeah, definitely. I'll be going over the fees at the end, but I'm glad that you brought it up because we're a one-stop shop for the landlord. We're the landlord's ally. We do the rent increases, rental agreements. The rental agreements are customized, and we also translate those into Spanish because the law does require a translated agreement if your tenant speaks a different language. Now, disclosure, we only do Spanish. We don't do a different language, but you could take our rental agreement and get it translated elsewhere if you need a different language.
But the law only requires Spanish if it's a Spanish tenant, correct?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yes. Okay, so rent increases. It's a shame that a lot of people thought that rent increases were completely frozen. And this is where it depends, right? It's not a one size fits all.
Okay.
But first and foremost, state rent control never froze increases. Increases are good to go. And a good thing to know about state rent increases is that the percentage changes, and it changes every April and every August. So the information that you see here, it's only active and good until April
of this year.
March at the end of March. April, we're going to have new CPI.
So let me rephrase that, because I think a lot of landlords, maybe they're not well informed. Even myself, or even real estate professionals in the industry may not be well informed. What you said was the state rent control did not freeze rate increases, and that's very important. Let that sink in, because there's a lot of landlords that are now saying, "Oh, I can't raise my rents." Well, that's not true. What you need to do is you need to reach out to myself or to Paulina to understand, where your property is, and figure out, what are my allowable rent control increases or my rent increases for that particular property. Great point, Paulina.
And, especially, I have a lot of landlords that don't want to evict the tenant. They're getting the property ready to sell or to list. And it's great to do the increase. So you could, when you do your listing, it shows your higher rental amount, because that's going to be a lot more attractive in your listing.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, investors specifically look for, increased income potential. So if you're able to increase the rents, you're able to at least show that there's more potential for income, and you'll get a lot more offers on your property. Most
definitely. So and let me just touch on what the rent increase means, because you see a lot of percentages and numbers. So the state of California says that landlords could increase the rent at a 5% base plus the CPI. CPI stands for Consumer Price Index, which is your inflation, right?
Okay.
So right before COVID, the percentage for LA County, for example, was 5 plus 69%, just 0.69. So the total increase was 5.69%.
For that year?
For that season. So it changes every April and every August.
Okay.
So this last August, it actually did a nice little jump to 3.6%. So your total is 8.6. Now, with prices surging, I'm expecting the new increase to go up in August to even 9.3. We shall see.
Oh my gosh, that's a great number. So you mentioned something that I want to get some clarity on. You said that it changes every April and every August. Potentially, could a landlord increase their rents at those times, or is it just customary to raise them just once a year?
A landlord may increase the rent one time per year, or even 2 times per year, so as long as you don't exceed the total percentage of that year. So right now, example, we have an 8.6. I have some landlords that I realized that they only did a 5%. So then I could increase a second increase for the remainder balance of 3.6.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, of course. Now, let's say you have no rent control. You have a single family property, or let's say a property was built in the last 15 years. You're actually not capped at all. Now, because we are under a state of emergency still, hopefully not for very long.
Sure.
Whenever there's a state of emergency, we have an anti-price gouging laws.
Okay.
Due to that, we cannot increase more than 10% right now.
I see.
But as soon as that's over, you could increase above. And there's no limit of how many times you could increase. And of course,
I'm sorry to interrupt. So as a landlord, let's say you're in a non-control area, and we plan on increasing the rents this coming, let's say April, and we do we ask one of our local property management companies to do, let's say, a rental market survey, and the landlord discovers that there's a potential that they can charge an additional, let's say, 12 or 13% above what they're currently charging to match market rents. What you're saying is, after a certain time period, which is April 1st, if I'm not mistaken, right? they can increase that to the 12 to 13%, correct?
I would do 10% now. Wait, the balance, you have to wait until we're cleared from the state of emergency.
Gotcha.
Once we're cleared, you could go your extra.
Wonderful. So you recommend doing it in 2 phases. Do the 10% now, or what you're allowed now, and then do the increase once the regulation is over, then do the additional difference.
Correct.
Wonderful. What a great point.
Now, the only area that's frozen, or areas, and I only have 2 here, but I'm going to mention a couple more. It's LA City, rent-controlled properties, unincorporated rent-controlled properties, Culver City, and Beverly Hills. Those 4 cities are still not allowing increases. Now, LA City is not going to allow increases until 2024.
Of any kind, regardless of the 5%, regardless of the inflation, the CPI or the inflation rate, they're not allowed to do any increases.
If you're subject to LA City rent control, you cannot increase. But your property could be in LA City, but you could be subject to state rent control. So you could do your increase. So it's only
Again, it's important to understand, not only, even if you do own a property in LA City, what she is saying is that you need to investigate. You need to ask her. You need to reach out to them to find out, can you increase it? Are you subject to those regulations? And if you're not, hey, then you'll be able to increase it. So don't, just because you own a property in LA City doesn't automatically mean that you can't raise it. Reach out to Paulina and her team. Find out if you can. It's worth the shot.
And this circles back to that scenario where the owner thought he was under LA City, sold the property, gave relocation credit. When the buyer came to me for the eviction, I'm like, whoa, you're not subject to these rules. You don't have to give him this.
What a great point. What a great example.
So that's...
So to the buyer, I mean, he ended up, let's just say the relocation that they left was a round number, let's say $30,000, I think you mentioned, right? So pretty much the buyer came into $30,000 additional dollars that the seller was really not obligated to pay because he wasn't subject to rent control. So again, to the point is, if you're in doubt, reach out to Paulina and her team. They'll definitely clarify it for you, and it could be a benefit to you.
Definitely. Thank you. This is new information somewhat. The rent registry. For those that have properties in LA City, you have to register your properties every year. But now we have new cities that have the same mandate. Unincorporated LA is one of them. The department handling the rent registries is the DCBA. DCBA stands for Department of Consumer and Business Affairs.
Okay.
Now,
I do remember closing on a transaction not too long ago where 2-unit property in LA, this was pre-pandemic, where we had to register the tenants and register the new owner as a new owner. Yeah.
And if you're exempt, you have to register yourself as exempt so they don't tap into those laws against you. Because the way the unincorporated and LA City rent control rules are looking at it is, hey, we're presuming that everybody's subject to these rules, and if you're not, come declare your exemption and why. So then the landlord, could do their declaration. I'm exempt because my property was built in X year. I'm exempt because I live in the unit, or so on and so forth,
Gotcha.
Now, Inglewood, Culver City, and Pasadena also now have rent registry requirements. And something pretty cool about LA City is that that city actually is helping landlords with ADU projects.
I see. In what way?
Different ways, depending on what the landlord qualifies for. They could qualify for a grant to build their ADU. They could qualify for waiver of fees for the ADU, or they could qualify even to pay the rent once it's ready for a renter. So there's different levels. And this program has been open for 2 years, and only 67 applications have been received in 2 years. So
now, are those applications only restricted to owner occupants or investors as well that own property in city?
It's the application does not restrict a certain type of landlord, but I am assuming that a investor will not qualify for a grant That's something that the city deals with. It's a new program, so I'm not too in tune with the restrictions. I just know that the service is there, and it is directed mainly for the mom and pop.
Excellent. Well, I mean, even if you're an investor and you own properties in LA City, it might be worth the shot. Even if they say no, you never know. They could say yes, right?
My assumption, because of my years of experience, is that at least they're going to be able to offer to pay the rents if the house a low income tenant.
Gotcha. Good point.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. And getting your file ready for an eviction, it's pretty much making sure that you have everything that I just mentioned.
Right.
Your governing law disclosures, that you're registered, that you've issued your mandated notices. If you're evicting for non-payment of rent, that you did your rent relief, and that you show that the tenant has been inactive. You want to make sure you have your timeline in order, and that you discuss your strategy with your eviction attorney. And rule number one, tip number one, never call an eviction company and say, I want to start with my eviction now. There's no way we could tell if you could or could not. We all want things done now, right? Now, the thing is, by doing that, there's a lot of offices that don't do the due diligence, because guess what? We're not regulated to make sure that the landlord is landlording correctly. Gotcha. So there's a lot of firms, big firms, that they don't have the obligation to make sure that the landlord did the governing law. It is registered. So they will start your eviction now. You go to court and you lose on a technicality, it is not their fault, nor their responsibility. So when you do...
That's really important to understand. I mean, because there are eviction services company that aren't going to do the detailed work that Paulina and her team are going to do. And guess what? Just like she mentioned, you're going to get into court. They're going to take your money. They're going to charge you what they're going to charge you. And they're telling you it's not our responsibility if you're not prepared, right? So correct. If you're a landlord, if you're a property owner and you have a challenge with a tenant and you need to start the eviction process, do the right thing. Reach out to Paulina and her team and have a conversation. See where your property is located. See what might apply to you. And believe me, it's going to be worth every penny of investment for you to do the things right, so that when the time comes, you don't have to start all over and your investment isn't going to go for naught.
Definitely. Just to give you an idea, we only charge $95 for the consulting, the strategy. You get a consulting report and a to-do list of what needs to get fixed before we proceed. So fantastic. I know that may be tedious for some landlords that want to start now, but trust me, it's better for you to lose a week and get your case in order than to lose an eviction. That's a lot more money to lose. Now, one thing that I love to coach my clients on is, this is a business decision. You have to treat this as business. The eviction is your last resort. We first want to try if you could make an agreement with your tenant, because that's literally what the court is going to make us doing once in the first hearing. Why spend the money for a judge to tell you go outside and settle it out when we could have done it without spending the money for an eviction, right?
Of course.
So it is very important, if you are able to mitigate your own scenario, take control into your own hands, then a professional needs to put this agreement in writing in order to protect your self, your case from a wrongful eviction. And it's 100% legal. So as long as you follow the regulations for each city, and you save yourself an eviction, that is even better. So please make sure that you're considering the different options before the eviction. Your eviction is really your last resort if you're in LA County.
Fantastic. Good point.
Okay, and with that, I think I have 2 more slides and I'm ready to wrap it up unless there's other questions. But we service, as I mentioned earlier, realtors, investors, property managers, and landlords. We are a consulting hub for the landlords. We want to make sure they are landlording correctly, because there's no landlording police until you take your case to court. That's when there's the to-do checkoff list. And that's when it's a technicality that throws your case off. The counties that we service is LA, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino. The services that we offer are consulting, case analysis, commercial residential evictions, credit checks, rental agreements, legal letters, small claims, anything to do with the landlord.
Fantastic.
I forgot to mention settlement letters. This is an idea of our pricing. We're a la carte. We don't charge for anything that you don't need. And we start with consulting. There's some agents or property managers that have us on retainer. What does that mean? For $150 a month, they get unlimited consulting questions. We review their paperwork. It's a great win-win for them because they don't have to pay for every consulting appointment. Right. And we're like the virtual assistant for $150 a month.
Absolutely reasonable, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt, reasonable, and for peace of mind, $150 a month. Why not have a team like MT Evictions and Paulina on your side? I mean, just makes sense.
Thank you. And if you have any other questions, you could email our team to mtevictions@gmail.com or contact our phone, our number, 323-697-3077. You will not always get me. Don't worry, I know, sad face, but I deal with retainers only and members. My staff deals with one-time clients, single appointments, and we have a big team, and we all have a different role to play, and we play as a team, but we're very well in tune with the laws to help you in your scenarios.
Well, fantastic, Paulina. I'm incredibly grateful for all the information that you provided us. Definitely a wealth of knowledge for landlords and investors that are having tenant issues right now and are thinking about, maybe starting the eviction process or thinking about maybe selling their properties, and have tenant issues. Please reach out to us, reach out to Paulina. Would love to at least get you into a consultation and get you prepared for whatever your goals are, whether it's to evict the tenant or, like I said, sell a property with the tenant in place and kind of understand what your scenario is and situation is. And more importantly, for you as a landlord investor to understand whether your property is actually subject to certain laws and regulations. So, Paulina, great information. Thanks for spending the time with us. I really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Hector Aguilar, Aguilar Realty Group. Thank you, Paulina, from MT Evictions.
Thank you, Hector. It's very nice of you for having us and providing this tool for your audience, for your clients and other realtors.
I do appreciate it. We try and make it a goal to bring valuable content to the times that matter right now. And I know that tenant laws and landlord protection is at the very top of our concerns right now because of COVID and the regulations and the restrictions that are in place. So again, I'm not a professional at it. I'm just glad and grateful that I'm partnered with Paulina. So any of my clients will definitely be using Paulina in any of their tenant issues or tenant questions they might have. And again, just grateful for the time, Paulina.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. Take care. Once again, Hector Aguilar, Aguilar Realty Group, brokered by eXp Realty. Stay tuned for next week's episode as we bring you more valuable content for owners, buyers, and investors. Once again, I'm Hector Aguilar. We'll see you next week. Take care. Thanks, Paulina.
Thank you, Hector.